Hello, welcome to the Cube Pod, episode 88. I'm John Furrier, Dave Vellante. Dave, salute from our new button room studio podium, the NYSE. I'm still in New York. You're back in Boston. Great week.
Yeah,
here.
Good to see you this week.
It's been great. I'll get the headphones on. This is the actual raw set. About a 17 by 20 location. I'm actually looking out over the show trading floor. The options traders are much louder than the stock traders. They yell a lot and they swear a ton. So for the folks that have never been here, it's New York, man. They're moving the needle on stocks. A lot of fun times here. Great week here at the NYSE. We had our NRF coverage, but so much going on in tech. Trump's inauguration's coming up. You got a lot of discussions. We were both on Trinity Chavez NYSE TV live show this morning, talking about Trump, some of the regulations, crypto, World Economic Forum, a lot of stuff happening and tons of news. Obviously, I love the retail piece of it. Here in New York, it's basically retail week. I actually ended up interviewing for the first time the chief AI officer, technology officer. I mean, he's the chief AI scientist for Databricks. And that was awesome. And to get his insights into what he's thinking, obviously they're here. Databricks is a big part of the whole NRF. Data is a big solution. But really talking about some of the things he was teasing out that's coming up at their event, gave some insight there. The chip controls, the export controls. You made a great comment with Trinity today. Microsoft, Google continue to add more AI stuff. Google Cloud, we're hearing more and more deals going to Google Cloud. Intel spinning out its venture capital arm in the latest series of divestitures. It's not clear how it's going to play out. Normally the corporate development and venture capital arms of the corporate strategics tend to be for-profit or a mix of both. We'll see how that plays out. And the number one question here is what's going to happen with Trump. And I actually was on a call this morning, a Zoom, with the Ethereum Foundation's leader. They are super stoked because Gary Gensler, you pointed out in today's thing, was ousted with Lena Khan, but apparently with all these subpoenas of the crypto market, it's been a crypto winter. Now that Trump's coming in, you're going to see a massive crypto in-migration where everyone fled the jurisdiction, aka United States. You're going to see a massive crypto. So that is something we should talk about, Dave, because we're back on the table with Ethereum. And then obviously from a developer standpoint, this could be a huge AI opportunity. Just tons of action happening. And of course, we had our awesome Cyber Resiliency Summit in Palo Alto. That was awesome with our analysts exploring that. Christoph Bertrand and team. Tons of leaders came through there, unpacking cyber resilience as it respects to storage and infrastructure, ransomware. Great event. And of course, tomorrow, actually today, I think it's streamed out on the NYSE. So all that content's out there. We have to go through all the content, but just a really great week. Incredible.
Yeah, love being down there. I love the NRF angle. I really enjoyed my conversation with Duncan Angove, who's CEO of Blue Yonder. He always brings the good data. He said that we waste a truckload of textiles every second. We throw out a truckload of textiles. It's like, wow. And his mission is to really tighten that up. I think that's gonna be an interesting IPO. Maybe not this year, but maybe next year. And what do you want to talk about? I'm interested in your thoughts on Tik Tok. I have some thoughts myself. The new administration. Where do you want to go?
Well, first, let me give a shout out to some of the folks here at the event in NYSE we had. It was a great dinner put on by RC, Brian Benedict and team. We had awesome activities. Megan McKenna, Jennifer Warren, Alex Smith, Brian Bauman was there. Everyone was there, right? So shout out to Megan. She's with Fifth, which is the group here in New York. I'm getting to know. I'm figuring out New York, Dave. So one piece at a time. But shout out to RC. They're a hot startup. Brian Benedict and his team really engaged. Good to see you there as well. So just the community that's coming together with the NYSE Wired effort that Brian Bauman's putting on is really taking on a life. I'm still blown away. I'm still humbled and blown away every day. I mean, I thought it would be big, not this big. You know me, I'm always, the glass is half full, but this thing's exploding in value. I mean, it's not a glass anymore. It's an ocean of value. So I can't tell you how happy I am. It's a lot of work, but the community is responding. So I just want to put a shout out there.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the our conversations we had on live TV today, live television, where we were talking with Trinity Chavez, who is the lead anchor host at NYC TV.
Okay.
She asked us about Trump's inauguration. I think she started out by asking you, Dave, about some of the regulatory things, what you're anticipating for Trump's returning to office in his first term, and then she asked me about the AI crypto side, and then kind of both of me with you around some of the rules. Trump's coming in. What's your take there?
Yeah, well, the guys before you came on were like, Dave, what are you going to do with Lena Khan out? Who are you going to rant at? And so Lena Khan and Gary Gensler. And like I said before, everybody said, well, okay, well, M&A is going to take off and there's going to be less crypto regulation. I think there will be less crypto regulation. I don't know about M&A taking off. I mean, Lena Khan, for all of her, what I perceive as faults, she has had an impact. And I mean, my criticism of her was always that she was taking the Sherman Antitrust Act and bending it, basically saying, the Sherman Antitrust Act, as I interpret it, always, you have broken the law. You have used monopoly power, to your advantage against, to hurt competition and to hurt consumers. And she kind of twisted that, in my mind anyway, to serve her ideology toward the potential for harm. Like you remember, initially she was saying, Amazon was bombing prices, and then she was saying Amazon was, hurting consumers by keeping prices higher. Okay, well, which is it? So, but I would say at the end of the day, Lena Khan had an impact. It was shocking to me during the election cycle to see how many young people were like, yes, Lena, go Lena. And that's just sort of this sort of populist backlash around big tech, which to me is astounding because big tech adds so much value, but maybe I'm biased toward big tech. But as I was saying before, the really important piece of policy to watch is that framework for artificial intelligence diffusion. I'd love to have a deeper conversation on that, but let me just also talk about TikTok for a moment. I think the TikTok narrative and the ebbing and flowing just underscores the dysfunction in the public policy within the US. The argument has always been on security grounds, which I've said in many CUBE pods, that's a mistake. They should be arguing on economic grounds and policy equity. Look, if the US social media companies can't operate freely in China, then TikTok needs to divest, or they can't operate freely in the United States, period. Put that back on China to defend its lame ass position. To me, that should be the argument. Security then naturally is taken care of in that argument to the extent that you say, okay, China, go ahead and defend your position. Either you have to divest ByteDance of TikTok and to a US controlled company, or you can't operate here. That to me puts it back on China. And unfortunately, what you have here is the backlash. And by the way, I know we're going to take, I think, the other side of this, because you said early on, leave them alone. I don't think you should leave them alone. I think you could use this as a little lever against the Chinese posture against our social media companies. And anyway, that's my position on this. And let me just one other thing.
Oh.
It underscores the dysfunction, what I mean by that, in US public policy. Think about what China does. Xi Jinping says, sorry, Ant, sorry, Alibaba, you are not going to spin out Ant. So, Jack Ma, go in the penalty box for a while. Done. They just make the decision. It's done. Now, I'm not saying we should have a totalitarian society by any means. I'm just pointing out the advantage that China has because they don't have this stasis and dysfunctional decision making. And the problem with that is that business leaders want certainty, and there is no certainty. It changes every 4 years, and I think that's a problem in this country.
Well, there's a lot of problems, a lot to unpack there, but I don't think I said to just leave TikTok alone. I think I was a little bit more dovish on the app staying around versus being a hawk. Normally I'm a hawk on things. Normally I'm a hawk on these things where I'd say just take them out. But I just think from a cultural revolution standpoint, I mean, there's going to be significant disruption to how people use social media, and TikTok is so popular. So, one, I think TikTok will, obviously the Supreme Court obviously made their ruling and reaffirmed the ban or shut down or, whatever the specifics was. It was simply, divest or ban it. I thought divestiture would have been another thing. They tried to do something similar with Oracle. But I think, ultimately, I think X wants to be TikTok. Everybody in the Valley knows that Elon wants X to be the TikTok replacement. So that's my opinion. I'm sticking with it. I think TikTok has that Chinese symmetry problem. There is stasis, you mentioned, is the reason why we have stasis is we have a democracy. China does not have a democracy. So it's a lot easier when you have, that kind of central, rule and you control all the systems and banks, funding, everything, governments, everything's tied together. Now, it's little apples to oranges on that one point. However, I think China, which has a hardcore policy where you have to have Chinese-owned companies, I think I agree with you on this one. The U.S. should say this should be a U.S.-owned company. Yeah, you can make money from it, but we want to make sure there's no national security problem. One, misinformation, the dumbing down of America. Some would say, I don't think that really buying that much, although some people would argue it's the junk food of social media. But it's just so popular. It's just ripping it out is going to create, a problem. So I think I would agree with a policy that said, screw you, China. You impose this stuff onto us, we're going to be symmetrical. Done. Symmetry. Right now it's asymmetrical, to your point. Okay, so how do you do that? You either shut it down or not. I think the Supreme Court is banned. In fact, there's already discussion that Trump says he's making the decision about TikTok and confirmed he had a conversation with Xi Jinping about the app. So it's got leverage. So, Trump is being Trump. So I think there's a lot of gamemanship in there. Ultimately, I think TikTok doesn't shut down. Okay, I think it's a great stake in the ground. Something might come out of it. Now, if China says we really don't care, and this was a lost leader stealth play anyway from a psych ops perspective, if that's the case, then TikTok gets shut down. But I think it stays and should be divested. I wouldn't really roll my eyes if Elon Musk grabbed it. Why wouldn't he? And then roll that into XAI, basically. So I'd be supportive of that, even though the anti-Elon haters would go crazy. I'm not one of them. I think, yeah, grab it. You can make a freaking rocket ship land with the arms and pick it out of the sky. Well, you can make social media work. So that's kind of my simple perspective. But I would be curious to see the reaction to TikTok going dark. I mean, shut it down for a day or two and watch people freak out. Apocalyptic. It would go crazy. They would just, people are addicted to it. Maybe that's a good thing.
Well,
again,
I think putting it back on China, I really do feel like this notion of politicians and policymakers focusing on the security issue, it just obfuscates things. They should just focus on the equity and the fairness. If you can't do that to our pledges, only we can do that to our pledges. That's kind of China's, approach.
Yeah.
And so, U.S. should
symmetry,
again, put it back on China.
The symmetry is key. I agree. We're agreeing on that. But here's the problem. There is no symmetry. And in the headlines today, and it's been in the headlines, everyone knows that China is attacking us. And in fact, a China-based cybersecurity company was just fingered in this Jennifer Yellen's computer. It was accessed to over 50 unclassified files. Okay, people are disputing it, but again, that's just one of many examples. And they breached the Treasury, right, with the Salt Typhoon hacks. So again, this is a legit geopolitical threat. And what Trump has to do in his presidency is play the geopolitical thing. That's why the crypto people are happy, because now they're going to be very friendly to crypto. That's going to be an opportunity to reset our national security and our global presence in an economic way with new levers. The problem is introducing new levers into the global geopolitical scene means breaking down old ones. So that's what's going to be, I guess, the fun/stressful part is going to be what the hell is going to break next. So I think it's kind of already broken. You got Davos up there coming up. The theme is collaboration and intelligence. And then the political layer. The geopolitics is so screwy. You got a war going on right now, multiple wars, and you want geopolitical unity. Just doing it to get peace is one problem. Never mind all this tech war going on. So we are at a tech war, Cold War right now, but it's happening. Yeah, we call this, Dave, remember years ago, we were really hawkish on theCUBE. Everyone remembers, watches our CUBE. Even 10 years ago, we even said, we're under attack. That was called crazy.
Yeah.
It's just, we've been under attack. It's the cyber warfare is happening.
You said it with Trinity Chavez today on Taking Stock. You said this is another Cold War, and I think you're right. And I think not only is it a Cold War, it's actually in a sense a hot war, not in the sense that we're shooting at each other, but the state of war has changed largely. You know, now you're talking thousands of drones. You're talking about cyber war, and that's the war that we're fighting now.
Yeah.
That's the new form of hot war. You know, my understanding is that you know, Chinese bad actors are, you know, infiltrating critical infrastructure and doing so in a way that could really do some damage. I mean, you look at how complacent we were about the California fires. You see what's happening there now. I mean, it's absolute devastation. It seems like people have their head in the sand about climate change, you know, and rising seas. And, you know, I'm all for drill, baby, drill too. But, you know, these things, look, without any environment, there is no business. And so we need to always keep that in mind.
You know, you got to think about what's going on in LA. It's basically the West Coast version of 9/11. I mean, I'm in New York when 9/11 happened. It changed everything. That was the day that changed everything. A lot of deaths, more deaths there out than the fire. But from an impact disruption standpoint, it's the West Coast version of it. I mean, towns are decimated. I was talking with someone, and I know another person, multiple people with the same problem. Imagine your hometown burned down to the ground, and you grew up there, right? So, I mean, it's just everything that you did as a kid, as a child, memories, families, community, all gone, wiped out. Okay, that's what's happened. It's psychologically bad. It's damaging. It's just disruption and destruction and displacement is huge. So it's like the impact of this is going to be far-reaching. We talked about last time on our pod, and we talked about in our mini pod here at the NYSE that this disaster will have not only tech reverberations around kind of impacting the tech industry, but just life in general. And it's depressing. You know, and the question is, will the West Coast come together like the East Coast did? I mean, one thing about 9/11 was that New Yorkers, you know, for all their bravado, I would love to say, we love New York. Yeah, you got a problem with me, I'll take it outside. Well, they're also very tight. They come together. And 9/11, people came together, right? And it's, you know, from all walks of life. I think LA, we need we need that movement now versus the bickering and complaining and politicizing of it. So, you know, so many people are hurt and damaged. So we need to have a different view on this. I hope the West Coast version of the 9/11 kind of impact Black Swan event will have unity and just love and support. I mean, and just people are almost living in hotels and towns decimated, communities gone.
I think the mayor of LA, my mind, she's done and she should be done when she just stood there and froze and couldn't answer the questions and had nothing to say, not even babbling, just staring, you know, at her floor. Gavin Newsom, on the other hand, people may not like him, but he's visible. He's, you know, taking action. I mean, I know Fox News doesn't like him and tries to portray him, you know, as a clown, but he's actually, I think, got a future. But, you know, in times of crisis, people will evaluate you based on how you react. And he's reacting. You remember Rudy Giuliani in 9/11. People were like, wow, Rudy is, you know, really a hero. And of course, then he turned into a complete nut job. But Gavin Newsom is, say what you want about him, but he's out there and he's walking around and he's pointing and he's bringing in things and he's, you know, trying to solve problems, or at least has the appearance of that. And I think that will play well. I think that guy has a future. But, you know, I agree with you. I think the finger pointing and the strings attached, you know, let's not, again, push ideology. People are hurting. People have died. People have lost their homes. I mean, you're talking about these $4, $5, $6, $7+ million homes, you know, which is probably most people's most valuable asset, gone, down to the land they're on. I mean, that's just heartbreaking. So,
Well, that's the
finger pointing doesn't help, in my opinion.
well
Calling
the
Gavin Newsom Gavin Newscum. I mean, it's like, come on, Trump. He's
yeah,
such a
yeah.
knucklehead sometimes.
Well, I mean,
I'm
look
rooting
at
for the guy.
the
Don't get me wrong. I'm rooting for Trump. I want him to do well. Hey, look at
no, no, the
you look what's happening
California.
in Israel right now with I was talking to the guys from Kubia this morning, Shaked, who was in Israel, Amit was in San Francisco, but they're both, and you remember Amit came into our studio on October 8th or 9th. And so that's very close to home. And, this ceasefire, getting the hostages back, Trump said he's going to do it. And you got to give the guy props for that, again, despite what you think about him. But so that's a positive thing. And I'm definitely rooting. I root for all presidents of the United States, every one of them, because if they do well, we do well.
Yeah. Well, we have to find somewhere to grant that. Lena Khan's out. But let's talk about some news here. Just some inside baseball. Infinidat got bought by Lenovo.
And just to put a poster in it or a pin in it, we put a pin in it or just a marker. I definitely want to talk about this artificial intelligence diffusion framework if we can make some time.
Sure.
You want to talk about it now? Let's talk about it now because it relates to the policy. Because I think this is like the most important piece of policy that we've seen in a while. It's called the Framework for Artificial Intelligence Diffusion. And I've never seen anything like this. I mean, the scope is unbelievable, the scale, the restrictions put on semiconductor companies. And, the impact on NVIDIA is kind of interesting. But essentially what it did, John, and by the way, SemiAnalysis, the guys at SemiAnalysis, Dylan Patel did, you know how they do like ridiculous, they make breaking analysis look like a too long don't read, John. I mean, it's unbelievable. But they did a really, really good analysis of this. If you're into this stuff, I mean, dig in. But basically what happened is this new policy put countries into 3 tiers. Tier 1 are all our friends, like Australia and France and Germany and Ireland.
Back up and explain what you're talking about. So give context. Set the table. What is this framework? What is that? Just summarize real quick.
It's a new set of restrictions that adjudicates where advanced chips can go. And it kind of defines them, based on a variety of parameters. And it also puts restrictions based upon, so the reason why did the Biden administration do this? They did this because people were running the existing restrictions. So for example, Volvo's a Swedish company, but they're owned by a Chinese car manufacturer. So by definition, the Biden administration, this policy has put them into the tier 3 camp, which is no chips for you, no AI for you. Even though, so Volvo, because it's owned by a Chinese company, can no longer get advanced chips, just an example. So it sets some bars there. But the most significant thing, in my view anyway, is they categorize countries by tier. So tier 1, so get this, tier 1, Australia, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, UK, all our friends, Japan, Norway, Taiwan, UK, US, okay. And then tier 3, the no AI for you crowd, China, Russia, Afghanistan, Cambodia, Congo, a bunch of others. And then everybody else. So if you're either in tier 1 with us, you're in tier 3 against us, or you're in the middle camp. And that's the gray zone with these really convoluted restrictions. And so listen to this. In here, tier 2, Brazil, India, Israel, Malaysia, Singapore, and Yemen. It's like, wait a minute, what a spectrum. Nigeria, South Africa, Poland, it's all over the place. And so what this is a massive, in my view, regulatory capture, which is going to favor AWS, Google, and Microsoft, because it's going to put the thumb on the scale. It's putting the thumb on the scale for US hegemony. And so there's like 20 certifications that you have to go through just to be in tier 1. So who's going to be able to afford to do that and take the time to do that and keep up with all the regulations, AWS, Google, and Microsoft? The tier 2 guys, there's this like incomprehensible set of stuff that you got to do. So people are just going to say, screw it. I'll just go to the US. So what it does is it forces everybody, including China and everybody else, to use US resources. So they're trying to put their thumbs on the scale for this. So what does this mean? Winners, hyperscalers, AWS, Microsoft, and Google. NVIDIA could be a problem here because here's why. Today, NVIDIA, when it introduces a new chip like Blackwell, it can take the H100, which prices are dropping like a rock, and it can sell them to these tier 2 countries. And it could take the old products and keep making revenue out of them. Nobody in the US wants them anymore because they all want Blackwell. And so it's going to be really interesting to see what happens to NVIDIA. I don't know if it's overstated, but a lot of people are talking about how this hurts NVIDIA. And you heard NVIDIA vocally objecting to this policy. Who else does it hurt? Malaysia is in the tier 2 countries. So it's like, what's going to happen to Malaysia? We're not sure they can buy these advanced chips and allow Oracle, who's got a $6.5 billion investment in Malaysia with data centers. They're no longer going to be allowed, or maybe they will be allowed, it's really unclear, to put advanced technology into data centers in Malaysia. It's really unclear. So Oracle could be a loser here. And sovereign AI loses. And everybody's talking about sovereign AI as a big tailwind. So it's too vague. You get these tier 2 countries. What my view is, what the Trump administration should do is bring these tier 2 countries into the US fold, make them transact in US dollars, maybe simplify their inclusion in the tier 1s, get more friendlies. And then the other thing, John, is I don't know what the unintended consequences are. People are saying, oh, well, this is going to, incent China to move faster. China's moving as fast as it can. It's going to have a hard time, just as hard a time building advanced chips. I think that's kind of, overstated. But to me, it's got to simplify this big Mongo middle of tier 2, Greece, South Africa, Angola, Australia, Brazil, India. Bring those people into tier 1, bring them into, our friend category. And so this is going to be really interesting to watch.
I'll tell you, I think it's bad personally. I mean, I think to have the enemies list, I have no problem with that. But when you start getting into all these kind of like waiting periods, I think it had 90-day window on some shifting of changes, getting licenses. I mean, look what Octane did at VMware. Just simplify everything, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, what are we doing here? I mean, come on. And again, like I said on Trinity's live show this morning here at the NYSE and NYSE TV, Trinity asked a great question about AI. And, it's not well discussed in the mainstream, but you remember those big scuttlebutt, Vinod Khosla and others have been talking about this. There's a kind of an alpha conversation around, is AI the US's Manhattan Project, right? So meaning the Manhattan
Love
Project
that quote, John.
Created the atom bomb kind of thing. So like, and they created all the engineers to work on it, which spawned innovation. So, in all our breakthroughs in the computer industry, military funding created the internet. Basically, everyone knows that. John Markoff wrote a book called "What the Dormouse Said," ripping off the whole '60s counterculture and how the '60s counterculture spawned the computer revolution. I recommend everyone should check out that book, "What the Dormouse Said" by John Markoff. But he kind of lays out about he's the famous reporter from the New York Times. He's now retired, but he's a great historian now. But that book laid out that the counterculture of the '60s, screw the man, hippie revolution. Those hippies built the internet because it came out of organic growth. It was like community. The DNS was ran by John Postal for years. Some say he was murdered, but like it's a whole other conspiracy theory. But the point is, the revolution, they didn't want to timeshare their computing resources. They built their own system called the internet. And they used academic resources and wrote on the back of military funding. Okay, what does that mean for today? AI is coming from the hyperscalers. So there's no military, quote, Manhattan Project initiative, but the overall CapEx being spent, you have a lot of investment into things that aren't yet clear, like a military investment in the old days. So there's a lot of stuff hitting the table that when you get a collective counterculture going on, like we're seeing now for sure. I predicted this, by the way, 10 years ago, we'd have a counterculture, we'd have a hippie revolution in technology. It's going to happen probably in this revolution, this next cycle of presidency. There's opportunity for change, and I think it's going to happen. So I think the Manhattan Project is a good benchmark because there's pros and cons to that. The pros is if you want U.S. leadership, you don't share AI with China. So if it's the Manhattan Project, we use the advantage as a superior build through strength. If it's the Cold War, remember Ronald Reagan's success was a lot of scandals, but the main success was taking down the Berlin Wall. Mr. Gorbachev, take down that wall. It's a very famous quote. Now, he beat the Russians into oblivion by outspending them. And they had things like Star Wars. You remember that, Dave? Star Wars.
Yeah.
He just spent more defense. And so he beat them through just outspending them and forcing them to go bankrupt. Now,
which was a ruse too, right? Star Wars was a ruse, but it was brilliant.
It became Iron Dome now in Israel. But I mean, that's the thing about it was basically saying we're a superior power and we're going to demonstrate power through strength, right? Now, okay, how do you do that today? You can't outspend the Chinese because, like you said, we're stasis. They actually have power, right? They're using all their levers to be powerful as one thing. So they would beat us in an AI arms race, in my opinion. So it's a tough debate. I mean, I could weigh on one hand. Yes, I could make an argument that AI is our Manhattan Project as a U.S. citizen, national. I'm like, okay, yeah. And then the other hand, well, the world's not sovereign anymore. It's a global economy. And look at Bitcoin. So I think that, if I had to lay down a position here, I would say that I am not on the Manhattan Project side. I'm for be a little bit of Manhattan in the sense of get some core jewels, fund that innovation in the U.S., but the global economy is what's going to make everything successful, in my opinion. I think you can't fight that fashion trend. Never fight fashion, right? The fashion is we are in a geopolitical global economy. And the more it gets fragmented and walled up, and it's just like not a good scenario because no outcome comes from it because then you're in defensive position. So I think harmony is a better outcome for AI than that. But there could be some arbitrage by China, to your point. So I think China is definitely an issue. But
well,
I don't know.
Mearsheimer,
I guess that's a hell of a rant right there. But I mean,
it's a good rant. But Mearsheimer, right, would argue that there's a real risk to China, what they're doing in the South China Sea, and the U.S. should be worried about preserving its hegemony. Others, like Sachs, what's Sachs' first name? Not David, but Jonathan Sachs. Jonathan Sachs, I think Jonathan Sachs, right? The University of NYU or University of Chicago professor would argue, well, there's big ocean in between, so don't worry about it. I don't know what the answer is, but I do agree with both of them that nuclear war is our biggest threat to humanity. Maybe climate change eventually will be a big too. But so anything we can do to avoid nuclear war, I'm in favor of. And so I'm concerned about tariffs. I don't know if they're a negotiating ploy or they're real. It's probably a little bit of both. But it's going to be really interesting to see what Trump does in his second administration. I don't think anybody really knows. I think it's clear that he has his shit together a lot more than he did the first time around. And he seems like his nominees for all these cabinet positions are doing pretty well, even though people might not like it. I think that's a good thing. I think the president should have a lot of latitude there, and let's get things moving fast, and let's see if we can get some stuff done.
Yeah, a lot of action. I got to say, one of the things that's coming clear, and this might be a good rant segment / setup. We can put a marker down on this and continue this conversation. But you and I were talking this week around our AI lab efforts, and one of the things I've noticed in the past 6 to 8 months, obviously expanding out the NYSE CUBE East region and doubling down on the CUBE West region in Palo Alto with interviews with the editorial video, is that we're talking to a hell of a lot of startups. And I think I've interviewed over 100 startups in the past 8 months, give or take 10 here and there. And we're talking about young guns coming under 30, right out of school, or a couple of years in at Palantir, Facebook, Twitter, all the hyperscalers, to senior people, right? So the senior older folks that are coming back in the business with no systems, because AI is a a systems game. Look at Jensen Huang. He's living a dream right now because he's been in this world for so long. It's not an age thing right now with this AI way, which is really a great entrepreneurial thing. But the business model, Dave, in the enterprise is so hot right now, and the uncertainty is so high. This big startups having a big problem getting in there, and the companies like Dell, Lenovo, HPE, they're at risk because everyone's trying to chase the developers to build on their stacks. When in reality is that the world is now not just you have to run on me, you have to run on me where I am. If I'm Dell or Lenovo or HPE, those companies in the enterprises like the big banks and all the verticals, they have all that gear, right? So if I'm a startup, they want to get in there. So we're seeing a big go to market with startups. There's interest, but they have to run with confidence, and they need benchmarks. They need to show confidence, and no one has that yet. So I'm seeing a real potential problem where there could be a startup implosion in the enterprise AI area. Okay, I'm talking about not an extinction event, but I'm talking about a serious, gridlock of momentum where everything looks good on paper, but sales into the enterprise, into production, could go to zero quickly, or just be non-existent until the enterprises have confidence with the existing gear they got and all the stuff that they're doing. So huge,
Hey, you're right.
and there's all this hype. There's all this hype
you're right.
too, Dave. Right? The hype is like, I run faster on Llama than I run Mistral. I got to do Bedrock. I got this. I mean, there's so much configuration challenges. Broadcom, for instance, versus NVIDIA. Some people are claiming they like NVIDIA better than Broadcom. That's the first I'm hearing that. But stuff's going to run on NVIDIA. Never bet against NVIDIA. But Broadcom owns networking. They're in all the fabrics.
Well, people might like NVIDIA better than Broadcom because they got the full stack. Broadcom's got the silicon, and it's got VMware, but it doesn't have the software that NVIDIA has, the AI software stack, except through Google partnership. So Google's got legit software stack. So that's where Broadcom and Google make really strong partners, in my view. Of course, Meta as well. I like Broadcom. We've liked Broadcom for a long time.
I want to ask you a direct question, because again, we've been predicting on-premise and hybrid AI workloads would be a great growth vector. Okay, that means Dell's AI factory and HPE, who just won a Twitter AI deal, is going to be a thing. Lenovo has a piece of this too, but they're not as prominent as HPE and Dell. They're banking on this on their financials. This could be a financial impact of their business. If the AI enterprise doesn't open up or slows by months or a year, that could kill earnings. What is your thoughts on this? Because, and by the way, does that slow down the on-prem growth?
I think your analysis is right on. I think these companies, HPE, Dell, Lenovo, and to a much lesser extent, Oracle and IBM, because they've got other diversified businesses, but the hardware vendors have between 12 and 18 months to prove that they can deliver an on-prem AI experience that is good enough and can rival the cloud. People want that. Enterprises that we talk to want that. Why? Because the cloud is expensive, and their data, a lot of their data that they want to AIify is on-prem. The but is there's a lot of work that has to be done to make sure that those on-prem AI installations can perform and deliver value the same way they can in the cloud. Now, well-funded financial institutions, JPMC and the UBSs of the world and the B of A's, they have a lot of resources, but mainstream enterprises don't have as many resources. They need to rely on companies like Dell, HPE, and their ecosystem. And I would say right now, I think their ecosystems are lacking compared to the cloud. They don't have the data stack. They don't have the surrounding tooling. Their governance stacks are not as clear. Their optionality is not as good. They don't have they have good security, but their security is different for, in different installations. It's a complicated matter. And so they've got, a limited amount of time to figure this out and prove it. And the other thing, John, is the startups all gravitating to the cloud. HP, Lenovo, and Dell, they don't have startup affinity. And AI and startups, that's where all the innovation is. So they got to attract those folks.
Yeah. What's coming out of the Wired community here and some of our community members when I poll them, straw poll this. Well, first of all, your point about there's a lot of stuff going on in public cloud. Mostly it's experimentation. Even Andy Jassy kind of said that in the cloud. The customers, the enterprise customers, want to have an on-prem hybrid alternative to lower costs and increase their expertise, skills. This is where they are at, the customer. If I'm a startup, okay, they're enthusiastic. The clients like them, the potential prospects, but they don't have the confidence that their ideas will map into execution, both on the production side. So they need to figure that out. So benchmarks are going to be huge. Okay, so here's the thing. I'll make one final point here. And I heard this directly from a startup. I said, would you work with Dell or HPE? Or I didn't say Lenovo because Lenovo's not on our radar yet to the level. I mean, they're not up to the level of Dell. And
Didn't they just buy Infinidat? Is that what I heard?
Yeah, we'll come back to that in a second. But the person told me, said, would you ever stop working with the cloud to work with Dell? And they said, no way, we're born in the cloud. The cloud's great. We love AWS. Most of it's AWS. Some more Google, some Azure, but mostly Amazon, 80%. Google gets about 10, 15, and then it's a rounding number for GeoCloud, NeoCloud, whatever.
Yeah, okay.
I don't see a lot of Azure. And I said, why? They says, well, I don't know what they have. There's no mind share. So Dell and HPE don't have mind share with the startups. However, he goes, but there's a big but in here. He said, look, when I went to do my POC, went into pitch it, all they had in the data center was Dell. And Dell and I don't just categorize Dell and HPE because Dell and HPE own the enterprise data center service. You go in there and Supermicro's in there too, but put them all in one category. I want my stuff to run great on those platforms because that's what the customer has. I'm like, there it is, Dave. That's where it's at. That's the opportunity for these on-prem server dudes, because these guys and gals will have an opportunity to go to start to say, we can be cool for you and relevant, right? So, I mean, nothing cooler than AI Factory by Dell. I mean, Dell's AI Factory is probably the coolest position. Well, they got that from Jensen. But cool and relevant means money making.
Well, the other thing is, they go to market. You know, Billy Scandal's got a giant go to market capacity at Dell. So if I'm a startup and Dell comes to me and says, "Hey, we're gonna turn you into a unicorn," let's go. They're gonna get my attention. Hey, did you see Bitcoin's over 105,000?
Cha-ching, baby. Back to my theory about geopolitical. I mean, we're in a global economy, and the Ethereum community is coming into the U.S. I just got the phone with them, a Zoom to the phone, old school. Got off a Zoom with the foundation there. They're going to be in Stanford and Cal Berkeley in the week before GTC. There's a huge back to the U.S. because now that Trump's in office, that is huge, huge.
Hey, I got to go.
So there it is. All right, Dave, I got to catch a plane. I'm heading back to California. I'll be back here. Got some great IBM stuff developing. I didn't have time to put a shout out to IBM. Shout out to the Christoph Bertrand from the theCUBE research team for the Cyber Resiliency Summit. The summits are thick and ass. Brian Bauman, Kevin Hawkins, the NYSE Wired team. This Wired this collaboration is blowing up. And so we'll see a lot more CUBE, Wired, open source kind of collaboration. Like with all of our customers, it's been phenomenal activity. It's a great network effect. Dave, we'll see you next time.
See you, John. Bye, everybody.